Okay, welcome to part 2 on learning, teaching, and technology. So in part 1, we started exploring what learning and teaching is. This video, we're going to go more into what technology is and how it affects society and a little bit of how it affects learning and education in general. So usually when we say the word technology these days, we mean digital technologies like computers and smartphones, things that require power. But technology itself is a much broader term than that. And thinking about it in a broader way can change your perspective and help you understand changes in the world in a different way. So here's a definition of technology. It's the application of scientific knowledge for practical purposes. So that could include when man created fire. They might not have understood all the science that went behind the creation of fire, but they figured out a way to do it. And it had significant changes for now being able to cook food or have a heat source. Or when man started farming, that changed their patterns of living and food consumption. Those were new technologies. The technologies we usually think of today are what I call digital technologies because they're based off of some type of programming that uses 0 and 1s. That's where the digital, the two pieces, the 0 and the 1 come in. So sometimes I use digital technology when I mean the new computer technologies, but we tend to use the word broadly. But just so you know, never say something like we don't use technology in our school because there's all kinds of things. Even the idea of having a school itself is a technology. It didn't just exist. Someone decided that a good way to help people learn was to have them go to school. So that itself is the application of some type of knowledge to a practical purpose. So to help put this in perspective, I want you to think about two things. One, this is a slate, like a mini chalkboard that students might have used in school 150 years or so ago, and then an iPad that students also might be using in school. What's similar and different about these items? Okay, we're going to come back to that. One more. When I was in school, which is going to age me, we had overhead projectors, and teachers could actually write on the overhead projector and it would show up on the board like this. And now we're pushing to have smart boards. What's similar and different between an overhead projector and a smart board? Okay, keep that in mind. We're going to come back to that as well. Okay, we're going to pretend like you are a teacher in 1840. And you work in this one-room schoolhouse in this small community, and your students primarily work out of books, which are technology, by the way. And sometimes when you teach geography, you have big maps on the wall, and then the students can gather around the maps and see them together. But most of your work is done through having students memorize things through books. You might have a little bit of paper and a little bit of pens and inks to do some work, but it's pretty expensive. And now your community raises money at the barn dance and they buy a chalkboard for the school. So the chalkboard goes in the front of the room, and all of a sudden your ways of teaching and learning change. How do you think that would change teaching and learning? So what I think maybe happened is now it's really easy for a teacher to teach a whole class at a time. Whereas before they had to go to the individual desks, now they're can show the whole class at once. They can all see the work that's being done. They can write problems on the board and all the students can see and answer, and then they can erase it and put new problems up the next day, which is much more convenient than trying to write things on paper. And we don't have to have enough books for all the students anymore. They can all see the problems in one place. So it would be a significant change. It also might change the type of work I ask students to do. So before I might be asking them more just to memorize and repeat back things, and now they're going to be looking at things more, looking at the math problems, and that changes how we learn. So now move forward, and all of a sudden students start coming with these slates that they can write on. How does that change how teaching and learning happens? So I think with a slate, a student now has an individual workspace that they can write and erase over and over, which is much less expensive than having paper and ink to do that on. They can write down homework problems, take them home, fill it out, give it to the teacher in the morning, then erase and start the next day. So it's going to once again change what happens in the classroom. So around the same time, over in the visual art world, there were some artists that were starting to use these devices called pencils. And pencils were nice because you could do different shades when you were drawing. So instead of ink that's just all one tone, one strength, with a pencil, you can shade it. And you can erase a pencil. But what they had to do is they had to use these dried out pieces of bread that would erase the pencil markings, which would get to be a little bit messy. So someone says, hey, that's a new technology. Teachers, you should be using this. What would a teacher say? Well, that means I have to have paper. And I don't want to have a piece of bread that's going to make a mess all over my classroom. Well, fast forward a little bit, and this guy comes up with a pencil with an eraser attached. This is the pencil end. This is the eraser end. And you actually had to sharpen the eraser end just like you sharpened the pencil end. And now it's a lot easier and cleaner to erase work. And at the same time, paper becomes less expensive. So students can maybe start using paper and pencil instead of the slates. And we get a modern pencil that is much easier to use. So that is going to cause another change in teaching and learning. Now, outside of education, society as a whole might have this notion of pencils as something to explore ideas, something where you can kind of put something out and then erase it and change your mind. I found this image that was pretty interesting because it kind of shows a romanticized view of what we think about pencils. We can write letters, we can draw pictures, we can draw dreams. A pencil has a connotation that we can use it for doing these things, exploring ideas. But when it goes into schools, this school system that previously has been using slates to write down problems, blackboards where students write down problems from the board and all answer the same thing, pencils might take on a little bit of a different character. So to start with, students have to learn to use pencils, and they would have had to learn how to use ink or chalk as well. But now a teacher is tasked with making sure students can use pencils and develop pencil control. So that's a whole area that we have to teach students in. Just like today we have to teach students how to use digital technologies and computers and such. Well, now that students can write their work and they can erase really easily, and paper's cheap, we can give them books of work problems, math problems, and have them work. And we expect when they make a mistake that they'll actually erase their work and start over. That changes how we approach teaching and learning. And then a new technology comes out, this Scantron Technology, where we can give a student a multiple choice test and a computer can give us a score. That's going to make another change in teaching and learning because now it's really easy to collect information about what students understand as assessed by tests. It also might push us to emphasize memorization more because it's so easy to determine whether students have things memorized, whereas it de-emphasizes settings where students can create new ideas or have more area for exploration. Okay. So as you can see, the pencil itself is not just a thing. There's more than just a thing behind the pencil. And so one way to think about this is to differentiate between a product technology like a pencil, or this is the Model T Ford, and an idea technology. What is happening behind that product? So in the Ford Model T, the idea behind it was the assembly line, that we can create inexpensive cars on an assembly line that most people could afford. Another example, if we have a product like an iPhone or a smartphone, that's great. It's a thing. But there's an idea behind that smartphone where now we have access to images and communication and news, and we can take pictures and create TikTok posts and all that stuff, all with this device that we carry around with us. think about how much that has changed society. Okay, so then we talked about a product technology of a pencil, but it can have ideas behind it, like these romanticized drawing dreams. And the ideas, it can have multiple ideas. So it can also have ideas behind it, like when we use it for multiple choice tests and such. How about this one? If we have a smart board, this is a thing. But if we look at one of the ideas behind the smart board, it could be that the teacher and the learner or multiple learners can work together in the front of the room on a board. Now, how is that different than a chalkboard, you ask? Well, in this case, the big difference is that they can actually cause something to happen and see the results. They can do a simulation and see what happens. Otherwise, it's just the same as a chalkboard if we're just writing things. But there are some affordances, what we call affordances of smart boards that support more creative learning, more experimentation in front of a whole class. Okay, final question today for this video anyway. What do you think now? What do you think is the difference between the slate and an iPad? So write about that, and then I'll see you in part 3 about technology in education.